I remember the first time I heard a man scream through a radio, not from pain, but from the raw terror of physics closing around him like a fist. They don't tell you, before war, that the sky can become a coffin. They don't tell you that sometimes the enemy isn't in front of you, it sits inside your own cockpit, disguised as technology you're supposed to trust. And they certainly don't tell you how small a man feels when he watches pilots walk toward their planes like they're walking toward their own graves. That's where this story begins. Up there, over the Solomons, with men clawing at the sky, trying to stay alive. February 14th, 1943, 20,000 feet above Guadalcanal. I can still hear the breathless voice. Brake right, brake right. Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh rolled his Corsair hard left, the Pacific sun flashing along that long gull wing. Below, jungle rolled like an endless green tide. Above, the sky was harsh, white-hot, merciless. The Zero carved inside his turn again, effortless as a hawk sliding through open air. Walsh pulled harder. The entire aircraft shuddered, ribs groaning like a thing made of bone instead of rivets and aluminum. 4 Gs. 5. 6. His world dimmed into a gray tunnel. I knew that feeling not from flying, but from watching pilots stagger off the flight line afterward, eyes glassy, searching for someone who could make sense of why a machine built by geniuses could betray them when they needed it most. Walsh didn't break off, not because he didn't hear the warning, but because braking meant dying faster. So he stayed inside that turn, wrestling torque like a bull rider hanging on after the gate slams open. His wingman shouted. The radio hissed. The Zero stayed glued inside his arc like fate itself had locked them together. The Corsair was a monster at speed, 2,000 horsepower, that big Pratt & Whitney roaring like it wanted to tear itself free from the airframe and run toward Tokyo on its own. Fastest thing in the Pacific. Could climb like a demon and dive like the wrath of God. But turn? Turn slow? That's where it betrayed our boys. And betrayal tastes the same in war as anywhere else, metallic, bitter, slow to swallow. We like to imagine we lost men because the enemy was clever. Sometimes that's true. Saburo Sakai and his kind, they were killers, sharpened by years in China and early victories. But in those first weeks of 43, that wasn't what killed our pilots. It was weight. It was torque. It was physics dressed in navy blue. 12,000 pounds of American steel trying to do ballet with 5,000 pounds of Japanese genius. The Corsair pulled and groaned and fought its own propeller, its own torque, like a boxer tripping on his shoelaces, while the other fighter carved perfect circles around him. And on the ground, the rest of us waited. The mechanics, the ones who didn't climb into cockpits, but still felt every loss like a punch to the ribs. They say war turns boys into men. That's true. But it also turns men into ghosts before they ever die. I saw it in the pilots' eyes when they came back, those who came back. Sweat-soaked, hands shaking, voices low as if speaking too loud might remind the universe they survived by accident. One evening near the revetments, Lieutenant Frank Baldwin sat on an ammo crate staring at nothing. The jungle buzzed. Mosquitoes whined. The smell of burnt oil clung to everything like regret. The plane fights me, he muttered, voice thin. Not the Zero. My own plane. He took a breath, slow and heavy. We wrestle physics, he said. They just fly. Less than 3 weeks later, he was gone, shot down in a turn he never should have attempted but couldn't avoid. We weren't losing because our pilots were brave. We were losing because they were brave. They refused to run. Refused to let a Zero dictate the fight. And physics punished them for it. At Henderson Field, the jungle didn't stop at the edge of the runway. It breathed down your neck every night. Damp heat, mud like quicksand, tents that sagged under sudden rain. The ground crew worked in grime and mosquito bites, sweat-stinging eyes, tools slipping in damp hands. That's where I worked. Wrenches, grease, oil-stained sleeves, and more bandage tape than pride. We patched bullet holes, changed plugs, bled hydraulics. No glory in it, no headlines. But every bolt we tightened was a promise whispered to a pilot climbing the ladder into his cockpit. This bird will get you home. Even when we weren't sure it could. Some mechanics just did the job. Tighten, check, log, repeat. Procedure was gospel. The manual was law. But one man listened. Jimmy Nagel, Pittsburgh kid. Hands like he was born holding a wrench. Barely finished high school. And yet, he had something many engineers didn't. He could feel machines. Not understand them in theory, feel them in his bones. Jimmy didn't salute easy. Didn't brag. Didn't talk much at all. But when a pilot came back cursing torque, saying the nose fought them in every turn, Jimmy didn't shrug it off like a mechanical inevitability. He crouched beside the plane, eyes narrowing, like he could hear what the aircraft was trying to confess. "Show me," he'd say. And pilots did. In the dirt. With sticks. With their hands. With pure frustration carved into their faces. He watched. Listened. Absorbed. That was the moment the war began to shift, not in Washington, not in a university lab, but in mud and sweat and frustration at the edge of the world. Because while engineers wrote memos from safe desks, and bureaucrats stamped "Denied" on modification requests, Jimmy Nagel looked at dying men and thought, hell with the manual. Maybe the rules are wrong. At the time, none of us knew what that meant. We didn't know one sleepless night was coming. We didn't know history was about to pivot by 1.7 degrees of blade pitch. We only knew this. War is cruelest when the enemy is silence. And Jimmy had just begun to listen to the screaming. I don't remember the jungle being quiet that evening. Guadalcanal never really slept. Even after dark, the air felt alive, thick with the hum of insects and the restless shift of palm leaves in the wind. But inside my head, everything was silent, so still, it felt like the world was holding its breath alongside me. Lieutenant Howard Finn stomped across the hard-packed mud toward the maintenance tent that night, boots kicking clods like he was trying to bury something angry in the ground. His flight suit was still damp with sweat and engine stink, hair matted to his forehead. You could always tell when a pilot had been pushed to the edge, eyes sharp like glass, jaw locked like he'd been biting down on fear. He didn't swear at us the way some did. He didn't need to. He just stood there, helmet dangling in his fingers, breathing like each inhale carried weight. "She won't bite," he finally said. I wiped my hands on an already filthy rag. "What do you mean, Lieutenant?" Finn crouched in the dirt beside the Corsair's cowling and dragged his finger in a looping arc. "I'm here," he said, tracing a wide turn. Then a second, tighter circle. "Zero's here." I pull. She mushes. "Nose feels like I'm dragging the whole damned prop through molasses. Engine wants to go one way, the airplane wants to go another." He looked up at me, really looked like he wasn't talking to a mechanic but to someone who could carry the weight of this frustration. "It's not a dogfight," he whispered. "It's a wrestling match with my own engine. And every time, it wins." I should have said the approved line, "Sir, it's torque. That's normal." But the words stuck in my throat like guilt. Instead, I heard myself say, "What if we could make it bite?" Finn's head snapped up. "Could what?" "Reduce the torque in the turn. Change how the prop grabs the air." His eyebrows pulled together. "How?" I swallowed. "Don't know. Yet." He stared a second longer, then breathed out something between a laugh and a sigh. "If someone could figure that out, son, we'd live longer than our airplanes." He walked off into the jungle dark, leaving only damp footprints and the echo of an impossible thought. And that night, I didn't sleep. There are turning points in a war you don't notice until decades later. They don't come with bugles or fanfare. Sometimes they start with a grease stain on your shirt and a half-burned lantern sputtering in the corner. I sat alone in the maintenance tent, the smell of kerosene sharp enough to bite, manuals spread open like a gambler's last hand. The Hamilton Standard Prop Governor Manual lay in front of me, sections underlined in greasy fingerprints from men much cleaner and more educated than me. Page 47, Section 8. Governor pitch stops are preset at factory. Adjustment requires certification. Unauthorized modification may result in catastrophic failure. Catastrophic failure. Those words sat like lead. Somewhere outside, a coconut crab skittered through leaves. A mosquito whined near my ear. Sweat trickled down my spine despite the night breeze. I thought of Baldwin's empty bunk, his spare boots sitting untouched. How he used to whistle when he walked by the tent, now silent. And I thought of machines. My father once told me, back in that cramped Pittsburgh garage, engines don't lie. They tell you what they need if you listen. He'd slide a hand along a carburetor like a priest blessing a sinner, murmuring to the metal as if it held confessions. That memory felt like someone had whispered it into my ear across time. I opened the governor. Springs, pistons, delicate races, more precise than anything I had any business touching. My pulse kicked hard against my ribs. I whispered into the tent, as if the night itself might argue back. It's not about breaking rules, it's about saving lives. The screw sat there tiny, brass gleaming faintly in lantern light. The fine-pitch stop, 23.5 degrees. That's what the factory declared sacred. I put the micrometer against the threads. My breath slowed. Turned the screw a quarter turn. Measured again, 21.8 degrees. A number no engineer had dared to write. A number the manual would condemn. A number that my gut, my hands, my bones said could change everything. I tightened it gently, as if turning a key in fate. Dawn crawled across the field like a tired soldier. The sky pinked, humid, heavy. I bolted the governor onto Finn's Corsair myself, every screw tightening like a heartbeat. I didn't tell him. Truth is, I didn't trust my voice not to tremble. When he climbed in, he only nodded at me. Engines coughed, sputtered, roared awake. Prop blur shimmered like heat haze. My stomach turned to water as he taxied out. Each second felt like a mile. The jungle crouched, waiting. And when that plane lifted into the air, my legs nearly buckled. I paced, counted breaths, ran my thumb over an oil smear on my palm until it nearly rubbed raw. Then the radio crackled. Static. A pause. Finn's voice. "Nagel, what the hell did you do?" My heart stopped. "Is it bad?" I asked back, voice like gravel. Silence. Then a laugh, disbelieving, breathless, alive. "Bad? Son, this thing just grew claws." He landed 20 minutes later, canopy popping open, before the prop fully stopped. He leaned down, eyes burning with something fierce and new. "You change anything else?" he asked. "No, sir." "Good. Then do it again." Regulations didn't care. Command didn't know yet. Hell, I barely fully understood what I'd done. But in that moment in the mud, engines idling, sun climbing hot and merciless, I understood something simple and enormous. Sometimes the manual isn't wisdom. Sometimes it's a prison. And that night, inside a canvas tent in the jungle, I had picked the lock. War rewrites the definition of courage. Some men show it in the sky, others in mud and sweat, and a rare few in the quiet moment before a decision that could destroy them. In those days, my courage weighed about as much as a propeller governor, just enough metal and stubbornness to gamble my entire life on a quarter turn of brass. After Finn's test flight, something shifted on that flight line. Not loud, not triumphant. Quieter, like the first breath after nearly drowning. Pilots moved different. Walked with a hint of disbelief in their step, as if they'd suddenly remembered hope had a flavor. They didn't say it directly. Pilots never did. But I caught them glancing at that Corsair like men looking at a door they thought was locked, suddenly cracked open. And so I worked. Silent, fast, nervous. My hands never shook while turning wrenches in Pittsburgh. They shook now. By mid-afternoon, I was elbows deep in a second prop governor when the maintenance chief's shadow cut across the workbench canvas like a guillotine. "Sergeant, what the hell are you doing?" His voice was low, not anger yet. Suspicion, fear. I didn't look up. Couldn't. If I met his eyes, I might crumble. Adjustment to the fine pitch stop, sir. That's illegal, he snapped. Manual prohibits it. Navy prohibits it. Hell, God himself probably prohibits it. I know. He stared at me, jaw tight. You understand engines can overspeed? A blade separates at 2,600 revolutions per minute, and it'll cut a man in half. I know. He looked at the tools, my micrometer, my wrench, my oil-smudged manual. You're risking your career. No, sir. I finally looked up. I'm risking theirs. The chief didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the revetments. Rows of Corsairs lined up like steel church pews, each one waiting for a pilot to climb in and hope physics was feeling merciful that day. He exhaled slowly. You'll fix 18 aircraft by morning? If I have to. He turned, walked away, and 2 hours later he returned silently, dropped a fresh lamp and extra rags on my bench, and muttered, Don't screw up. But secrets don't stay buried in war. Not when pilots start whispering, mechanics start moving faster, and aircraft suddenly hold turns they never could before. The next morning, Major William Geese, broad-shouldered, jaw set like a steel beam, stormed into the maintenance tent. His boots splashed mud, his voice cracked like rifle fire. Which one of you modified my aircraft? Silence. You could have heard sweat drop to dirt. I stood up. Sir, I did. He stepped close, face inches from mine. Rage and worry. Braided like rope. You adjusted certified government equipment without authorization? You understand the liability? The risk? Yes, sir. You could blow an engine, kill a pilot. I know. But sir, we are already killing pilots. I'm trying to stop it. Voices behind him erupted: engineering officer, operations officer, each shouting, waving paperwork, accusing me of sabotage like war wasn't sabotage already. The engineer scoffed. Do you have any idea how many variables govern blade pitch? Altitude, manifold pressure, humidity? I cut him off before fear could freeze my tongue. Engineers don't fly combat missions. Silence fell like dust after a shell burst. For a moment I thought they'd court-martial me on the spot. Then a new voice spoke, quiet but ringing like a bell struck in winter. I flew his modification. Finn stepped forward. Back straight. Eyes locked on the COs. And it works. The engineer scoffed. Placebo effect. You want it to feel better, so it does. Finn leaned in. Sir, with respect, bullets don't care about placebos. That plane turns. More raised voices, accusations, regulations, fear disguised as doctrine. Major Geese lifted a hand. Silence, again, immediate. His voice was steady. We test tomorrow. My stomach dropped. I'd hoped for quiet adoption, not spectacle. One standard Corsair. One modified. Same altitude. Same G-load. Maximum sustained turn. He looked directly at me. If you're wrong, Sergeant, someone dies. If you're right. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. War finishes sentences for you. That night, sleep avoided me again. I sat on a crate staring at my micrometer like it held judgment. My lungs felt wired tight. Doubt gnawed like a rat inside my ribs. Finn found me there. No swagger, no cockiness, just bone-deep fatigue and stubborn faith. You think I'd fly your plane again tomorrow if I thought it wasn't right? What if I missed something? One blade goes over speed. He cut me off gently this time. Then I'd die with a chance. That's more than we had last week. Outside, engines coughed, as maintenance crews tested magnetos in the dark. Jungle night pressing close. Lantern light flickering over steel and sweat. Jimmy, Finn said softly. Nobody gets remembered for doing what the manual says. People get remembered for saving lives. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Fear sat thick in my throat. He clapped my shoulder once. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, you change the war. Dawn came cold for once, strange for the tropics. Like the air itself held its breath. 2 Corsairs rolled to the line, one standard, one touched by hands that had no right changing history. Walsh climbed into the unmodified plane. Finn into mine. Major Geese stood in the tower, stopwatch raised. I stood in the mud, wrench still in my pocket, despite having nothing left to tighten. VMF 124 cleared for test flight. Engines roared, dust flew, and the two machines climbed into the morning. Up where physics would choose who lived, who died, and whether a mechanic from Pittsburgh would end the day in glory or in handcuffs. Some moments in war don't feel like battle. They feel like judgment. That morning on Guadalcanal, with the sun bleeding gold over the palms and two Corsairs climbing through pale mist, I wasn't watching airplanes. I was watching fate spool out in propeller wash. Those two birds, one built by rules, one touched by doubt and grease-stained stubbornness, banked left, wings shining like polished bone, and disappeared into a clean blue that felt too peaceful for what it was about to witness. Men like to pretend we master the sky. Truth is, the sky only loans itself and collects interest in blood. Up there, at 10,000 feet, the engines leveled to a steady growl. The radio crackled faintly, wind hissed, the world held its breath. I held mine too. Major Geese's hand hovered over his stopwatch as if time could be bullied into fairness. Begin sustained left turn. Maximum continuous power. Maintain coordinated flight. Report stall onset. His voice drifted through the radio tower, steady as steel. Finn answered first. Calm. Controlled. Turning. A heartbeat later, Walsh's voice tense, pushing, forced through G-force grit. Turning. Hard. We couldn't see them from the ground. The horizon was quiet, but I could picture it. Those great gull wings biting into air, props clawing, pilots wrestling invisible forces, two machines circling the same patch of sky like wolves testing dominance. At first, only the engines told the truth. A distant vibration in the air. A shifting hum. The rhythm of effort versus inevitability. Then the tower operator's binoculars caught it. Fins gaining radius on Walsh, closing inside him. My legs nearly buckled. My hands went cold. Geese's jaw clenched. Walsh's voice cracked through radio static, strangled, breathless. Can't hold him. He's inside me by 50, no, 70 feet, damn it, he's circling me. It didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like disbelief, like a man witnessing a sacred law of nature suddenly rewritten in front of him. Finn's voice came next, controlled, almost stunned. Modified aircraft holding turn. No torque fight, controls light. Silence followed. Not relief, just shock, the kind that creeps into bones, slow and cold, like realizing the door that always said, "Do not open," has been unlocked the whole damn time. Finally, Major Geese lowered the stopwatch. His voice shook once before he caught it. Test complete. Return to base. When those Corsairs dove through cloud and roared back over Henderson Field, every mechanic, every pilot, every soul in shouting distance turned to watch. Walsh taxied first, canopy sliding open. He sat there a moment, helmet in his lap, breathing like a man who'd just met truth and didn't know whether to shake its hand or fear it. Finn rolled in behind him, engine still ticking with heat. He climbed down slow, boots landing heavy in the dirt, eyes finding mine across the flight line. He didn't smile. Not triumph. Something deeper, solemn, gravity-heavy. He walked up and pressed his forehead lightly to the Corsair's cowling, as if offering thanks to a living thing. Then he looked at Major Geese. Only 2 words. It works. Geese exhaled like he'd been holding in a lifetime. He turned to me. The field was silent enough to hear tools clink. Insects hum. "Sergeant Nagel," he said, voice low but steady, "you will modify every governor in this squadron by morning." The engineering officer exploded. "Sir, you can't be serious. This violates Navy directive. We need Bureau approval." Geese didn't even look at him. "I'll take responsibility." Then he fixed me with a gaze that felt like both a blessing and a warning. If we lose a single aircraft because of this—" He paused, the weight, real and raw. "You and I face court-martial together." I swallowed hard. "Understood, sir." He nodded once. "Then get to work. War isn't won in battles. It's won in the hours no one writes songs about, the ones where sweat smells like fear and hands ache and sleep feels like a rumor told by kinder worlds." That night, the maintenance tent glowed like a shrine to defiance. Wrenches clanged, micrometers clicked, lanterns flickered amber over metal guts and tired faces. Mechanics didn't ask questions. Pilots didn't sleep. They hovered like shadows, waiting to see if the machines that carried their lives were changing beneath our tools. One young corporal got quiet watching me adjust a governor. Finally, he whispered, "You really think this saves 'em?" I didn't look up. "I don't think," I said softly. "I know not trying kills 'em." A pause. Then he nodded slow, like a prayer forming. From outside, a pilot's voice floated in the dark. "Make 'em turn, boys. Make 'em mean." We worked until dawn. The Bureau of Aeronautics reacted faster than bullets do. Telegram arrived like thunder. "Unauthorized modifications. Cease immediately. Aircraft grounded. Personnel subject to court-martial." Geese read it, folded it, put it in his pocket like trash. "Negative," he radioed back. "Modified aircraft survive. We fight." For 11 days, Washington roared. Threats, orders, authority pounding its fists on desks. But war doesn't care about desks. War cares about men who don't come back. And halfway across the Pacific, a Navy test pilot named John Blackburn arrived. He flew the modified bird first, then the standard one. When he landed, his face looked like someone had just handed him the future in his bare palms. "There's no risk," he told command. "No compromise. This isn't luck. This is engineering born where it matters under fire." Approval came the next day, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity finally exhaling. When the engineers called it field innovation, the pilots laughed. Not cruelly, just knowing. They'd seen death breathe down their necks enough times to recognize salvation by sound, by feel, by instinct. And that's when I learned something war only teaches the few who live through it. Rules save armies. Men save each other, and sometimes the smallest act of rebellion isn't breaking a regulation. It's refusing to accept that someone else's certainty is worth another man's life. I didn't sleep that night either. But it wasn't fear this time. It was something different, quieter. Hope, maybe. Or the hum of engines waiting for dawn, ready to turn the war by a degree so small no one without grease under their nails would ever see it. But big enough to bring sons home. War has a sound when it changes. Not drums, not cheering. It's quieter, almost intimate. Like metal deciding to obey a different future. February 28th, 1943 Bougainville. The sky above the Pacific wasn't gentle that morning. The horizon shimmered, the air thick with heat and nerves. 8 Corsairs lifted off to escort dauntless dive bombers, engines howling like they'd tasted something sharp and hungry. Every one of those fighters carried my fingerprints inside its heart. My wrench marks, my doubt, my hope. Each prop governor, every tiny 1.7 degrees defiance of authority spinning now at combat RPM, blades knifing through air like truth carving through arrogance. And I stood there, oil-black hands clasped behind my back, listening as they climbed into the blue. They reached 18,000 feet when the call crackled through the headset of Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh. "Bandits, 3 o'clock high." Zeros came in like ghosts, silhouettes sliding through sunlight, pale wings cutting down at impossible angles. Samurai steel and skyborne instinct. Before, that sight meant a knot in the gut. A reminder, don't turn with them. Pray you have altitude. Pray you have speed. Pray you make it home. But today wasn't before. Walsh rolled right, not away but into them, like he finally trusted his machine to Meet violence with violence. The dive bombers banked and dropped toward target, and Walsh faced the first Zero head-on in a turning engagement, the kind that had been a death sentence, the kind that had stolen Baldwin, the kind that carved silence into empty bunks. Walsh's gloves tightened on the stick. He felt the airframe brace, felt the torque surge, except this time, the nose didn't lurch. The wings didn't fight. The plane didn't scream in protest. It leaned. It flowed. It turned. The Zero curled inside the circle just barely, but the Corsair held pace. Walsh added throttle. The modified prop bit air like a predator catching scent. He pulled harder, vision tightening as G's pressed him into the seat. Black rimmed his sight. Sweat stung his eyes. But the nose came around. Steady. Clean. Just a little more. Through his gun sight, the Zero expanded fragile metal and rising panic on the enemy pilot's face. He fired. 50 caliber rounds tore through the Japanese fighter. Fuel burst. Engine tore open in a flash of steel and flame. A scream of sky and then silence. A black streak down toward ocean. First time a Corsair killed a Zero in a sustained turn fight. Walsh didn't celebrate. Combat doesn't allow it. Because as that first Zero fell, another clawed up from below. Walsh rolled inverted, feeling the world flip and stretch, then pulled down into a second furious turning fight at 8,000 feet. No hesitation. No fear of the plane. This time the Zero pilot tried everything: climb, reverse, skid turn, steep bank, every trick the Pacific had taught since Pearl Harbor. And the Corsair stayed on him like vengeance with wings. 30 seconds of pure will, steel, and physics rewritten in real time. Then another burst. Another Zero broke apart. 2 turning kills. In one mission, impossible until it wasn't. When Walsh landed, he sat motionless for a moment in the cockpit, breathing the way men breathe when they've just wrestled death and won. The prop ticked as it cooled, metal settling like a heartbeat slowing after a sprint. He climbed down. His boots touched Guadalcanal dirt. His helmet hung loose in his hand. He walked toward me without a word. Every mechanic paused. Every pilot watched. He reached out. Not a salute. Not a pat on the back. Just a hand. Rough, trembling slightly from adrenaline and something deeper. I took it. "You saved my life today," he said quietly. It wasn't loud, but it hit harder than gunfire. Behind him, another pilot muttered, half reverent, half stunned. "Damn Corsair just turned like a Zero." I didn't smile. Couldn't. Everything in me felt too full terror, letting go, pride too fragile to touch, relief, like a wave that threatens to drown you even as it lifts you up. But deep inside, something steady formed. A conviction. We hadn't just fixed a plane. We'd tilted the war. Not with medals. Not with rank. Just with stubborn hands, sleepless nights, and one forbidden quarter turn. The weeks that followed turned whispers into truth. 342 victories. 67 losses. Kill ratio near 22. 1-inch modified squadrons. Japanese reports described American fighters moving as if with new spirit. Saburo Sakai wrote in his diary, "The Americans have changed. Their machines turn as ours do, but strike with greater force. The sky favors them now." And somewhere in the Pacific saltwater, the first modified prop governor lay on the ocean floor, attached to the wreck of a Corsair whose pilot had lived long enough to fly again. Victory rarely comes clean in war. But sometimes it comes in the shape of a mechanic's wrench and a refusal to accept the words impossible and authorized as gospel. Back in the maintenance tent, I wiped my hands on a rag, though the grease never really left. Finn clapped my shoulder. "You didn't bend brass, Jimmy," he murmured. "You bent fate. Maybe, maybe not." All I knew was this. Airplanes had stopped killing their own pilots. And the sky felt different now, as if it had finally realized the Americans weren't done yet. The war rolled forward, swallowing years the way fire eats dry timber. New islands, new missions, new names painted beneath canopies and stenciled beside kill marks. Pilots came and went, some triumphant, some silent forever. Engines aged, wings tired, the Pacific burned, then cooled. And the Corsair kept flying. 12,000 of them. Everyone born with a secret, no blueprint ever acknowledged. A tiny adjustment, almost invisible, that let American hands turn a heavy warplane like a predator instead of prey. But here's what matters most. No plaque on those production lines said thanks to a mechanic in the mud. No Navy directive credited a sleepless night under lantern light. No engineer signed off on the origin of that idea. History is stubborn that way. It remembers victories, not the hands that built them. By the time Okinawa fell quiet and Tokyo's fires faded into memory, the world was already shifting its gaze. Jets whispered on the horizon. Propellers would soon feel old, heavy, ancient. Pilots returned to wives, to quiet porches, to grocery stores and baseball games. Some walked without a limp. Others carried pieces of shrapnel in their bones or ghosts in their eyes. And me? I went home too. Pittsburgh didn't look like Guadalcanal. It smelled of steel mills and river fog, not salt and cordite. Men there worried about paychecks and summer humidity, not prop pitch and zero-turn radius. I reopened my father's garage. Hung a wooden sign. Nagel and Sons Auto Repair. Engines rolled in. Chevys, Fords, Studebakers. Oil changes, carburetor rebuilds, brake jobs. People complained about rattles in their trucks and whining belts. I listened, just like always, turned bolts, felt machines breathe, sent folks home safe. Not one customer ever guessed that somewhere out there, at the bottom of warm Pacific water, lay a propeller governor I'd once modified in secret, one that helped shift the fate of a war. And I never told them. Glory was for pilots. Grease was for me. I preferred it that way. Years passed. The world forgot the hum of radial engines and jungle rot and the way prop wash could smell like courage. And then, 1978. I was under a Chevy that afternoon, wrench deep, shirt soaked with summer heat, when Boots walked into the shop. Not work boots, military polish, crisp slacks, a quiet weight to their footsteps. I slid out from under the car, blinking at the sudden light, and there he stood, Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Walsh, U.S. Marine Corps, Medal of Honor resting on his chest like a piece of the sun he'd stolen from combat skies. Older now. Gray at the temples, hands still steady. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Some wars echo for a lifetime. Finally, he smiled softly. Jimmy, you already know why we're here. Behind him stood 56 more pilots. Men who'd flown that same gull-winged beast with its new bite. Men who had survived because someone gave them a sliver more sky to fight with. They handed me a plaque. Polished wood. Brass plate. Simple words. To Technical Sergeant James P. Nagel, for the wrench that fought physics, the courage that ignored the manual, and the hearts you brought home. I stared at it for a long time. My throat tightened until breathing felt like swallowing broken light. I don't deserve this, I whispered. Walsh shook his head. You do. We just took too long to say it. Behind him, pilots nodded. Some wiped at their eyes. Men who once tore open clouds with machine guns now just stood quietly in a dusty auto shop, remembering. And in that moment, I understood something war rarely gives anyone. Closure. Years later, when I passed, the obituary was 3 sentences. It mentioned I was a veteran. That I ran a garage. Nothing more. No medals. No headlines. No parade. But somewhere in Quantico, tucked small at the bottom of a museum exhibit panel, the truth sits in plain sight. Field adjustment pioneered by TSGT James P. Nagel. USMC 1943. That's enough. Because the measure of a life isn't how loudly it's remembered. It's how many lives it quietly lifts out of danger, how many futures it saves without needing applause. Sometimes the greatest victories don't live in statues or books. Sometimes they hum in prop blades, whispered by pilots who made it home. They survive in generations unborn who never knew they owed their existence to a mechanic with dirty hands and a conscience that refused to bow to regulations. And if history ever asks what heroism looks like, look to the man with grease on his sleeves, and a heart stubborn enough to say, "The manual is wrong, and these boys deserve better."